Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today for our next episode. We're talking about real estate today, as always. And today is a special episode. We're talking a little bit about creative financing. This is for investors, primarily people who want to invest, and not always you have to put 25% down and go to the bank. Today we're going to learn a little bit more how to. It's very interesting for me too, because I don't know these tactics. And how to creatively finance, owner financing, subject to, and all this stuff. With me today, Brian O'Neill. Brian, how you doing?
Hey, Oleg. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit. What are we talking about? What are the ways for creative financing?
When we say creative financing, we're talking about terms, right? So anything non-conventional. There's a few different terms I'll use, and I can explain each of them. But essentially, like, not every seller can sell their house conventionally or wants to, right?
Because of the condition?
Either because of the condition or maybe their situation, right? Maybe their situation is, I give a perfect example. A lot of people owe what their house is worth. Or maybe maybe the house is worth less than what they owe. And if they were to sell conventionally, they would potentially have to come out of pocket at the closing table, write a check. Mm-hmm. So there's ways to avoid that. There's also ways to avoid short sale or foreclosure. And one of them is using a terms structure, which I refer to or is well known subject to.
Subject to.
So you can, and this has been around, this is not a new concept. This has been around since the 1800s. People have been buying on terms. You could do it on anything. As long as the seller is open to it, you can buy something on terms, a house, a car, a boat.
On terms, it means what?
Basically, the seller is financing you. Uh-huh. You agree upon terms with the seller, and you can do that transaction without having to get the banks involved. So I buy properties on terms without using any of my own credit, without using banks, and in many cases, not having to put any of your own money down. That's the beauty of this strategy.
So what has to happen for seller to be open to it?
Sure. They typically would have to be in some type of pain or in a scenario where, I'll give you two very common scenarios. The one I just mentioned, where they have low equity or maybe negative equity, or another scenario where a seller owns their house free and clear with no debt. Mm-hmm. 1/3 of all homes in the United States are owned free and clear.
That's right.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people. So a lot of sellers will see the benefit of selling on owner financing for tax purposes, for estate planning purposes, rather than taking a lump sum. And if you sell your house on seller financing, you will get more money, and not a little more, way more. If you look at, this is why the banks are rich, right? They have a lot of money because they're selling on long-term financing with compound interest. So you as a seller with a free and clear house have the opportunity to do that.
So you, as a seller, becomes the bank?
The seller becomes the bank.
And they make money on the interest?
Well, they can make money in several ways. They can make money on the price. So again, when I talk to a seller, I have a conversation with them. If they're open to doing something on owner financing, I'll say to them, listen, Mr. Seller, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I'll give you the price that you want if you're willing to give me the term that I need, which could be 30 years. It could be 20 years. It just depends on the situation. Not everyone's willing to go 30 years. Now, when you're in a 30-year situation, you're typically paying interest. So let's give an example.
Yeah.
A $400,000 house. Mm-hmm. If you're paying 3% interest on that house over 30 years, the seller's going to collect $600,000. Mm-hmm. If you ever look at the truth in lending statement, I know you do because you're in the industry, what you pay for that house is way more than the sale price over time.
Right.
So when I say the seller's going to get way more money, that's what I'm talking about. They're going to get way more money. And then again, they're not paying any fees. In a lot of cases, I'm paying closing costs or at least transfer taxes. So the out-of-pocket for the seller is very minimal, and sometimes they can get a down payment.
Do you put a down payment?
Sometimes I do. On the longer terms, I do. Yeah, it just really depends on the seller and their specific situation. We were talking a little bit offline about, people who just need to be done with their house and get rid of it and can't sell it. Right. Then maybe you wouldn't have to put a down payment. So every scenario is different, but yes, that's something we can do.
Okay, but then the question comes up. Why there should be some kind of, like, a lot of sellers are like, okay, 30 years, no, I want the cash right now.
Sure.
That's not going to work with that kind of seller. Mm-hmm. This process is not working, right?
Right.
There's no way they can get the money with creative financing right away.
No, but they could get it in a shorter term. So if they're on open to 30, well, okay, well, I have a lot of sellers that are looking at 15 or 20. What were you thinking? Mm-hmm. And then they'll tell you, well, I'd be willing to go 5 years. And you can still create a good deal as an investor, a great deal as an investor, if you're able to get a longer time, whether than 1 or 2 years. I mean,
so, question. When the property is free and clear, it's easy. 2 people, nobody else. What if there's a mortgage?
Sure. So if there's a mortgage, it becomes a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different strategies you can use. The first one is what we refer to as subject to. I'm going to use another term here. In Illinois, we call it contract for deed or a land contract, if you've heard of that. And essentially what you're doing, a seller's in pain. So I'm working with a seller right now. He has a house that's worth about maybe $210,000. He owes $187,000. So after it's all said and done, he's barely going to get anything, maybe a few $1,000s. And he really can't afford the house. That's the situation. He can't afford to stay there anymore, and he couldn't get the price he wanted. So I talked to the seller, and I say, okay, look, I'll buy the house for the 187, right? The loan's going to stay in place. That's what I mean, subject to the existing financing in place. The loan stays in place. I'm going to make your payments every month. I'll pay your closing costs. And we'll agree upon, maybe $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 that would come to you once we close, because we do a formal closing. The loan stays in place, so the seller is able to move on because he needs to move on. He can't afford the house; he's going to lose it. So I'm able to solve that problem, and then now what I go do is I find a buyer who needs time to obtain a bank loan. They can't qualify right now. They need a little bit of time. Maybe they're self-employed. Maybe they had a life event like a divorce or a medical event. Their credit's set back a little bit, but everything else is good. They have employment. They have down payment money. They just need a year or 2, maybe 3 with the banks to qualify for the loan. I place them in the house, and essentially they would provide a down payment. They pay a lease payment, and then eventually they would cash out of the property.
So you make money on the down payment from the buyer and a spread every month.
So there's actually 3 ways that I earn money in a scenario that I just described. So one is the premium that I sell the house, because again, they're buying the house 2 or 3 years from now, or potentially even longer. Sometimes I do 5-year options. So if I buy the house for $200, I might sell it for $215 or $220. So there's a spread on the premium. And then I would collect a down payment. That's typically anywhere from 5 to 10% or more, sometimes 20%, depending on the price of the house.
And they have to have that much money.
Yeah, and not everyone not everyone has it day one too. Like some people need time to save, so they can get into the house. They act as homeowners. They do not act as tenants, so they're not calling you up in the middle of the night. Hey, you got to fix this. My toilet's broken. They're homeowners. So they do repairs. They'll do upgrades. They act as if they're the homeowner, because eventually they will be.
Right. Okay.
Then they're paying a payment to live in the house. So if the mortgage payment's $1,500, it might be $1,700, $1,800. It just depends on what the rents are, right? So you make a couple $300 a month there, and then while they're in the house and I'm paying the loan's getting paid down. So principal is getting paid down. So on a house that's $187,000, it might be $300 a month at that point. That comes off the loan, and that is also another way that I would get paid at the end when they go cash.
You didn't spend anything.
Well, I spent closing costs.
Yeah.
I gave the seller some money. However, I got that from the buyer. So it's a free house essentially.
Yeah. Okay. One more question that I have. What happens if you stop paying?
Correct.
Who's
Sure. So in a situation like that where the title transfers, okay, because I essentially own the house, and I get all the benefits of depreciation and ownership, the loan is still in place. So there is some.
And it's on the person's name, the seller's name.
The seller, correct.
He's responsible. If you're not paying, he's responsible.
If I don't pay and I default, he would essentially, or the seller would have to go into foreclosure, which is not pretty. So what we typically do in those scenarios is we do a contract for deed if the seller's nervous about it. I mean, if you just listen to me, I don't get paid until the end, right? Like that's what benefits me, is sustain it long term, especially when there's little equity in the house. So we can formulate a contract And again, the attorneys on both sides always, we make it palatable for both. If I were to default, let's just say if I didn't make payments for 60 or 90 days, seller gets the deed back. They don't have to go through the foreclosure process. They just get the deed back. The deed is sitting in escrow for the time being until I fulfill my obligation. They get the house back. Now they would have inherited my buyers, and normally they're not wrecking the house, but then they would have to deal with the buyer. So there is some risk. You have to be comfortable with it. But again, there's a situation, a problem that we're solving.
One more question. If there is a bank, does the bank has to know?
Yeah, good question. So in most mortgages, in every mortgages, there's a due on sale clause. You know this. So if you transfer the title and the bank goes looking, they could call the note due. There is risk. There is risk revolved around that. So there's a couple things that we can do to alleviate that. Number one, there are insurance companies that sell insurance against a due on sale clause. So if they call the loan due, the bank, this company will cover the amount that's due.
What is that?
Yeah.
What is this?
yeah. It's
insurance.
Yep. It's insurance.
You buy the insurance?
You buy the insurance. It's expensive. It's typically about 1% of the purchase price of the home. So it's expensive, but they will pay.
Who buys it?
I would buy it. Yeah. The buyer. So if I'm buying a house, I would buy that protection.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know
Correct.
that. That's good.
Yep.
Okay.
I learned it recently. So you can do that. The other thing is that if we're doing a contract for deed, or we call it maybe an installment sale or articles of agreement for deed, the deed is not actually transferring. So it's in escrow. So there is no alert there is no due on sale. Yeah. So that alleviates that 100%. And then you can still,
But then you're not the owner when you bought it.
Well, okay, so this is a good thing, and we don't ever give tax advice or legal advice, but my accountant treats it as I own the house. So I get all the benefits on a contract for deed, even though the deed is sitting in escrow.
Depreciation and all that.
Depreciation, correct.
Principal interest that you paid off.
I get the deductions. Yep, I can depreciate the property, and then
wow, that's like magic.
It's awesome.
But then, how do you scale it? Right? If you do one, and then you taste it, you probably get it's like a drug.
Yeah.
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 Then you're like, oh my God, how do I just do hundreds of these? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hundreds is you definitely need people, right? You have to have
one
a
more
team.
question before we go to the 100. Have you ever had a situation where the buyer you put in, so it's a little bit complicated. You need to find a seller and then you need to find a buyer.
Right.
There's different strategies you use to find each. What have you ever had that the buyer would say, I'm done. I don't want to pay. I'm out of here. I don't want to buy it.
Sure.
And then you find another one, right?
Yeah, I've actually had that happen.
But that's good. Then
Yeah.
you bring you a new down payment.
The biggest thing, Oleg, is communication. So all of our buyers sign in front of our attorney, and we explain everything that's happening, what they're doing. I mean, their deposit is not refundable. We don't give it back if they decide to leave, as you said, and I've had that happen. Hey, I got another job, I got to go.
And then a lot of attorneys don't know what they're doing. Probably there's not a lot of attorneys that know how to structure these things, right? Correct,
or they're not interested in doing it, right? So there's some education involved on my end. A lot of them have done it. After 2008, there are a lot of these types of transactions that were going on because the housing crisis. So there are a lot of contract for deeds, or a lot of subject to deals because values went down so much. But we don't see it as much now. It's starting to come back. But yeah, you have to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
I always question that. I invest. I keep buying, and my question is eventually you run out of money. How do you scale? It's unscalable. You have to wait until you pile up a little more, or you just create some kind of a syndication with friends and then pile up some money and then you buy together. But that's again, you have to. This is cool, but then you have to find a seller who has pain. That's a trick. Where do you find them? It
is definitely a trick, and it takes dedication and commitment on a daily basis. My team is talking to sellers every single day.
You got a big team?
I have a team of 4, and I have 2 people that are calling, and then I have an assistant that helps me, and then I still talk to sellers. I still talk to sellers every day. So a couple different lead sources you can use, and I know you know them. People actively trying to sell. So FSBO's for sale by owners, right? Expired listings, we don't actively call anybody under agreement with an agent. That's not correct morally and ethically. So expired or canceled listings, we'll call them
Of course.
for rent by owner. And this is, you don't even have to pay for these leads. You
Yes.
can go to Zillow and look
Free.
at a city or a county for rent by owners. For rent by owners, that's typically an easier conversation because they're willing to rent their house, meaning they don't want their money right now. They're willing to rent. Maybe they're a tired landlord. Once you dive in and get into their situation, maybe they tried to sell but couldn't get the price they want. Maybe they can't afford to sell because there's not enough equity in the house. Those are free leads. You can just go on the internet and grab them. Then you can pull targeted lists.
Yeah, I just thought about one seller that I have in Chicago that she bought it for 180. She can sell it now for 150. That's a condo, and now she's just trying to wait until the market comes up. So I'm trying to think maybe I can help her out some other way than just listing. She's not going to list because it's
Right.
That's just something off topic. I just thought about her.
I mean, we
spoke
can
with her
we can
yesterday.
talk about that particular situation right now if you want. I can.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
yeah. So what does she owe, or do you
She
know?
bought
what
it
she
for
owes?
180,
Okay.
and she can sell it for 150.
Okay.
She bought it too much, but how much she owes, I don't know. She probably paid it down a little bit, so she probably owes less than she can sell it for.
Sure.
But in her mind, she wants on 180 because that's how much she bought it for.
Right.
That's the trick
Yeah.
I'm dealing with her.
The question I always ask sellers, and this is always very important, is after it was all said and done, like after you paid your realtor, your closing costs, after you walked away at the closing table, what was the dollar amount that you were hoping to net to you?
Yeah.
And that number is usually much different than if you take the sale price versus what their loan balance is. They all have a number in mind. Well, I hoping to get $5,000. Okay, well then I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I could take over your payments, and then you have to insert their pain. Like she wants to go somewhere, but obviously she wants to go somewhere. Maybe she wants to be with her kids, whatever the situation.
Right now it's
is.
rented.
It's
Right now she's
rented.
renting. Yeah, but she's out of state. So that she doesn't want it really. It's like, okay, it's cash flowing, I'll keep it. But if there's an opportunity, I'm getting out.
I'm getting it. Okay, absentee,
so-
out of state owner.
So she can actually be a good prospect.
Totally.
Well, we make a deal. You talk to her and we make a deal.
Right. You just got to solve her problem, which
Yeah.
is she's out of state. She doesn't want to deal with the property, probably doesn't want to deal with the tenants if it's rented. You can take that on potentially and then again get her a price just as long as she's willing to wait to get the money, depending on how much she has. It's a great situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely got to ask right questions
Yeah.
to figure out if that's a good candidate.
You always have to. It's like I always tell new investors, when you're talking to a seller, right? Because a lot of people are scared to talk to sellers, especially if it's cold, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What would you do if your neighbor put a for sale sign in the yard? What would you do? You'd go over and talk to him.
Yeah,
Hey, where are you going?
yeah.
What are you doing? How much you selling it for? You'd have a conversation. So
Yeah.
that's what you have to treat the seller is, just ask them some very simple questions about their situation. You can even say, what's your situation? Why are you selling? Or if it didn't sell, like, why didn't it sell?
For sale by owners, get a lot of calls, right? I used to call a lot for sale by owners. In the beginning, when I just started, I'm like, what do? I just start calling. And
Yeah.
sale by owners, those are, they say, fastest source of business opportunity.
Yep.
That's for realtors, But yeah, they get called a lot. But I still call once in a while. I get the for sale by owner that I'm in my area and a good one, and I'll call, I'll meet. Sometimes we get a listing and try to sell it. But they have in mind, they want to sell on their own because they're going to save the commission and stuff like that. Especially here right now, market's good, everything's selling. So
Right.
let me see, maybe I can sell it without the real estate agent. Sometimes they're lucky.
Yeah.
But then you're looking for a different kind of person. You're looking for somebody who has to sell, they have to get out, and have some pain.
That's right. They need to relocate, or there's so many. When I talk about, because I get the question asked a lot, why would somebody do this? And I say there's more reasons why they would do it versus why they would not do it. Selling conventional, hey, me too. I want to get top price for my home and sell it in 2 days and get 50 grand over asking, right? But that's not always the situation. People have real problems that a traditional sale may not be able to solve. You can solve it with creative financing. You just have to educate the seller and understand what their problem is.
And how do you do when the loan is higher than the purchase price?
Yeah,
value.
again, time solves a lot of problems.
Right.
So would I buy a house that had a $200,000 loan? It was worth $100,000? No. But if there was some negative equity and I could catch up, and I essentially own it, there's 20, 25 years left on the loan, I'm okay with that. As long as it cash flows on a monthly basis and I can see in the future that I'm going to be
So your structure is pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You take it for which price? For
I would take it for what they owe.
For what they owe.
For what they owe, yep.
Uh-huh. You take it for what they owe, and then basically they get some kind of like $5,000 at the closing from you.
I would pay their costs, so there'd be no out of pocket for them.
Okay, so they're breaking even. So they're just getting out.
They're walking away from the house.
Okay, so walking away, you pay the closing costs, and now you find a buyer. The buyer now gives you a down payment and monthly rent.
Monthly. Yep.
And you have to make money on the difference in the payment and the monthly rent. Right, you need to cash flow. Mm-hmm. Okay, but, okay, right. So you pay it down, and then every month your equity builds up.
Equity builds up, and I'm getting the monthly cash flow. Yeah.
That's very good.
Time. You just need time.
Can you scale this?
You can. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can. But you have to think about...
But the worse the market, like like a crisis gives a lot of these deals, brings a lot of these deals, right? Like big economic shifts or something.
Or again, that helps, right? So in 2020, after COVID hit, a lot of people panicked, they froze. A lot of people were very, very open to terms. People are a little less open now. They still think like the for sale by owner. Well, I'm going to sell my house right away. I'm going to get top price. I don't need a realtor.
Yes.
Which I think is the wrong move. And that's why most for sale by owners do something different after about 30 days. They get tired of people calling them.
Oh yeah.
Realtors, they get tired of the showings, and they don't, unless they have experience, they're not really doing themselves any justice trying to sell it on their own.
For sure. You're better off hiring somebody who knows what they're doing.
Totally.
For sure. I've seen so many cases like people hire even flat fees for like $100, which is much better than for sale by owner. Yeah. If you go in flat fee, it's 100 times better than for sale by owner, but it's still not enough. You're doing all the work. You need to know what you're doing. If you're against some realtor who brings the buyer who's been experienced and know what they're doing, the contract's going to be in their favor, and then you don't even know what's in that contract. You don't even know. So you're going to have an attorney, but it's going to be a little bit too late when the attorney gets hands on the contract. That's already negotiated and signed.
That's right.
Now you're trying to redo it, and the buyer's going to say, no,
yeah.
We're out. Now you're back. So it's a little bit, it's tougher. But I was going to ask you something else.
You were asked about scaling, and I can comment on that. So, not every seller can accept no money down, right? Some sellers want money. Like some sellers would sell for what they owe, but hey, I need maybe $10,000 or $15,000. So that's where the scalability comes in. If you have the ability, and again, that's still less than going to a bank and getting a loan and going through that whole process of having to qualify for a bank loan, which can be very difficult. Mm-hmm. You can still scale it. If you have money, if you have funds, if you have a pool of investors that want to be in real estate and invest, but don't want to, be in the day-to-day and get their hands dirty, then you can approach a lot more sellers and be like, hey, look, all right, you want 10% down or 5% down, or you need a little money to move, we can provide that for you. And we can still solve your problem, which is taking over your payments, letting you move on from the house.
So you have two people who are calling for you.
I have two people that are calling. I mean, we're calling
nonstop
every day, every single day, nonstop.
But you have to have like a list every day, new lists.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people
sources?
trying to sell their house around here, and then other sources, right? And then follow up.
Do you use Mojo for calls?
No, I use a tool called Freedom Soft. And
I have Mojo.
Okay, and then we just hand dial all the numbers. I mean through the platform, right? Mm-hmm. So my VAs are calling, and we're just trying to find out if people are open to it, like find out what their situation is. There's a lot of no's.
Oh yeah,
a lot of no's, and then you have to just follow up. And know now, especially a FSBO for sell by owner could be no, I'm going to test it. Well, 30 days later when they haven't sold, they might be more open to it, or 6 months they might be open to it, or a year.
Do you have automated system for following up?
We have automated system for following up. We'll send text messages. Sometimes we'll send mailers. I typically don't do a lot of mailing because everyone else is doing it.
Do you have like a market report for the seller? What's going on in the area or no? Or is that is not so beneficial for you?
It isn't really, because I'm trying to solve a problem. If a seller, when I go back to the beginning, I can give you the price you want if I get the term I need. If you have time, if you have a long amount of time, the price is really irrelevant. It really is. Especially
as a buyer.
As a buyer, especially on seller financing, if I'm making principal only payments. I'm going to give you an example for your listeners here of how you can create a 6-figure deal on owner financing. So if you have a $200,000 house, you're able to buy a house for $200,000 from a seller and give them $900 a month principal only payments. So $900 a month, no interest. And you get a 4-year term. You get 4 years with the seller. You can create $100,000 in all 3 paydays. The deposit, the monthly spread, and then the principal pay down. I mean, think about the loan pay down. $900 a month times 48 months. That's almost $46,000 right there in pay down.
But the seller has no benefit if there's no interest.
The seller gets their price. So if they want $200,000, they're willing to wait 48 months. They're going to get more. And I love the way you're thinking right now. It's like, why would anybody do that? And they do it.
But that's good, yeah, because if you see, the property is not worth 200, it's only worth 170, but I'll take it for 200.
Right.
And the seller's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What else? Where's the catch? The catch is that you're not gonna get everything right now.
Right.
You will have to wait a little bit.
Do you want less now or more later?
Yeah.
That's the conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes it pays to wait.
Yeah.
That's why we buy cash flowing properties. We wait, and it pays to wait.
Right. And what are you going to do with the money right now? I always ask that. Like, what are you going to do with the 170? Well, I don't know. Well, I need
to put it in a mutual fund.
Right. What's that going to do for you?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know. I don't do it.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either.
But then, it's not stupid. As long as you don't spend it.
Correct. Well, you get a lump sum. It's like you can spend it or blow it. Like, would you rather have the monthly guaranteed income and then you get your balloon payment in 4 years or less?
But then when there's a loan, it becomes a little bit trickier, and then you have to have a good attorney.
Yeah, when there's a loan, we do it the right way. We use title companies, we use attorneys, and we just notify the seller. Like, I normally don't have end dates when we do that. So if I'm buying subject to their existing loan, again, I tell the seller, this loan can get paid off in 2 years. It could be 2,000 years.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. So if somebody who's watching us wants to do a deal, and if I want to do a deal, but we don't know what to do, would you be able to partner up?
Oh, absolutely. I'll be able to partner up. I'll be able to help you, walk you through it, because this is complex, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what to do, and if somebody has the lead, let's say we know that I come across probably leads every day that they want more than, like, I know that that there's one seller I met last week that wants too much. Maybe that's possible to do that one. So, maybe somebody will come across somebody who wants a little bit more, then you agree on that, and you just make terms, and you have attorneys and everything in place.
That's right.
So we can kind of like maybe cooperate.
Yeah, get in touch. And then a lot of the leads that we look at are from wholesalers who can't necessarily solve a problem. They don't know what to do with this seller, right?
I get a bunch of emails from wholesalers too.
Yeah, and we will.
It's all in the areas that I don't like.
In the areas you don't like. Yeah.
Another question. I'm interested in buying multifamily, like 6-8 units, and I want to do owner financing.
Yep.
It's hard. I've tried. It's hard.
Yeah.
First of all, there's not that many that are in a good condition. That's not that important. The buildings that I like,
right,
I don't see them for sale, so I probably have to start mailing, making calls, and getting in touch with the seller. Most of the time, they don't want to sell because it's a cash flowing property.
Right.
Yeah, but a lot of them are going into retirement soon, so they're somewhat good prospect. I haven't cracked the code yet.
Yeah.
They're good prospects, and there's a lot, and you can scale because there's like 6 units at a time, so you can get to 100 units pretty, I guess fast. But as soon as you crack this little sales technique, probably.
Correct, and it's really about. So I love that you said that, because before I started focusing on single family and doing this terms niche, I wanted to buy multifamily, and my biggest issue was and I had money, I had the skill, I was nervous to invest my own funds. And then I was even more nervous to ask other people to invest alongside of me. And then I heard somebody talking about buying commercial properties with no money down on owner financing. I said, what? So I went to follow that. Now, not only do I know how to do it, I know where to find those leads. So, the 6 to 8 units, like the commercial properties, because it's over 4, it's a little bit more challenging. But if you find like a mom and pop who doesn't, they might advertise their house in the classified ads in the newspaper, and they'll be willing to do something on seller financing if you can solve their problem, right? They may not want the lump sum. You can definitely do it on, 2 to 4s all day long. You can do seller financing or even terms. Even if they have debt, you can still do the same thing. So it's just a matter of finding them, and you can pull lists in an area that, have multifamilies and under your certain parameters, and you can write them letters.
Right. If it's listed, then listing agent is like, a lot of agent would be like, what?
Right.
What?
Yep.
No. How do I get paid?
Yeah.
They're going to have a problem understanding this, because I understand it's something, but the agents should know this. This is kind of like good episode for agents too,
Totally.
Something they can use as another tool, for the seller. Look, you're not going to get that price if we go in the market, but here's what we can do.
Right.
To get the number.
Right. Or if you're getting close to the expiration, like nobody wants an expired, right? You don't want an expired.
Yeah.
It's
Listing,
an option for you.
listing.
Like, rather than let it go, here's another option. Like, I can also buy your house. This is something for you to look at.
How do you find the buyer at the end? We haven't talked about that.
Yeah, great question. So,
Craigslist?
in short, I will never have enough homes for all the buyers that are out there.
Really?
Correct. So when you think about how many renters are out there, like there are more sideline buyers than there are buyers who are pre-qualified. So it's pretty easy to find people who want to do something either on a rent-to-own or a lease option or even seller financing. It's just a matter of, once you find these people who have raised their hands, you have to make sure they can get to the finish line, which is the bank loan. So we do, I advertise on rental sites. So I'll advertise on Zillow, Craigslist, Marketplace.
Lease to own. Is that what it's called?
Lease to own. Mm-hmm. And then in some situations, if they've proven themselves, it can be seller financing. So if I own the property, if I have the deed, I can essentially be the bank. Then they never have to go get a loan. That could be someone who is self-employed or has an all-cash business potentially, and they just are never going to look good on paper to a bank, but they have the ability to pay, and eventually they could pay the loan down. So you have the ability to do long-term financing, and then again, that's just mailbox money, and you're not managing a renter.
Yes, that's different.
Yeah.
With tenants, you take all the calls, you pay all the repairs, and there's management involved.
Right.
Here, you eliminate that.
You eliminate it. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Because they're not renters, they're buyers. Yeah, especially if you're doing something on contract for deed.
And if it falls apart, there's no big deal for you, because you get another one who pays another down payment. So pretty much you got even more than you really was planning to get, right?
Correct.
They don't get their down payment back. It's non-refundable.
It's non-refundable. They sign that in front of the attorney. We make it. Now listen, we never want that to happen, right? Like we're trying to help people get loans. We want them to get to the end. It's the nature of the business. You're dealing with people. Life happens.
Yes.
So people are going to default.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to, maybe if you're doing a lease option, you might have to evict somebody, or somebody might leave. It's just something you're going to have to deal with. If you can't deal with it, then you shouldn't be in the real estate business, right? You're going to have problems. But it's how you overcome those. But yeah, you just do it again. And that's why you always have more time with the seller than you do with the buyer. If I have a 5-year term with the seller to cash him or her out, I'm not going to have a 5-year term with my buyer. It'll be shorter, maybe 3.
Mm-hmm. Why?
In case of the hiccup that you mentioned. So if I have to cash my seller out in 5 years, on or before 5 years, I want to make sure that I give myself room with my buyer. So if my buyer defaults after 3 years, I still have 2 years to fulfill my obligation to the seller.
But once you get like 100 properties, you're like, it's a little messy, no?
Well, it could be.
You just have some people that are managing, helping you out.
Correct. So you have to have a team. I mean, you're going to have 100 properties and not have a team of people. Yeah, absolutely. You could even look at having a property management company handle the entire buyer side. You know, you can have a mortgage servicing company pay all your mortgages, because we pay the mortgages direct for the seller every month. We don't give them the money and then they send it to the bank. We send it direct to the bank because we want to make sure that loan's getting paid.
How many you're able to get in a year? Like
you can, again, depending on the scalability of it and your in private investors, I mean, you can do 12 to 15 in a year with a small team. But again, based on the scenario I just gave you, 6-figure deal on a 4-year, like how many of those do you need as an investor to be okay?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Right? You know, so I mean,
you're putting no money down pretty much.
Or little. And again, the money that you would put down, you get it from the buyer.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
At least like keep an option for somebody who is, not going all the way in into that strategy, doing something else, but they're somewhere in real estate, somewhere talking to sellers here and there. That's a cool strategy. Yeah, that's cool for me. Yeah.
The other thing I would say too, and this is why I think everyone should at least have some knowledge about this skill and know what it is. Imagine if you go buy your next house, like your primary residence, on terms. No money down, seller financing. You don't have to go to the bank. Like, if you could save a 10% or a 20% down payment, what does that mean for you and your family? No banks.
Okay, I see a house. Seller, talk to the seller. Seller says, I'm going to sell. So where do I start? Tell him how much you want.
Yeah.
And then seller says, okay, I want $450.
If it was somebody that you knew,
no.
If it's not somebody you know, I always want to know why they're selling. So,
okay, I'm going to Florida.
Yeah, going to Florida.
Yeah.
When do you need to be there?
Next month.
Next month. Okay. Did you already have a place to live? Do you already have a place picked out?
Let's say they're looking with a realtor right now. They're gonna. Okay, let's say no. They said they are under contract and they're gonna be closing soon, and they're putting it for their house for sale. Soon too. Got
it. I would dive into that motivation a little bit more. Like they're relocating. I would say, do you need to cash out of this house here that you have in Illinois?
Let's say no.
Yeah. No.
If no.
Right.
Then no good.
No. If they say no, I don't need the money, then it's perfect for a terms transaction.
Okay. Right. But if they really need the money,
right,
that's not going to happen.
I will typically say to them, I said, look, I'm probably not your buyer. And here's why. If you need or want the money now to cash out, to do the next thing, I'm not your buyer. If you have the ability to wait, I can help you get more, and I can free you of all the financial responsibilities of this property in Illinois, but you have to wait for your equity. If there is any. If they don't have any, they don't care. A lot of people they think that they need to be done with the house, meaning the loan's got to be paid off, like everything's got to be out of their name. Several of our sellers, Oleg, have gotten other bank loans while this loan is still in place on the house that I have under agreement. It's because the bank treats it as they're renting their house. They're leasing their house. So they don't count it against their debt to income ratio.
Yeah.
So that guy in Florida could get another loan as long as their mortgage broker knows what they're doing. And I've talked to several of them and explained it to them, and then they get a loan.
If somebody wants to learn more, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm happy to help. So you can just email me direct. My email is Brian, Brian, at BKW. That's B as in boy, K as in Karen, W as in Will, propertysolutions.com. And
okay, BKW Property Solutions.com. We'll put it somewhere on the bottom.
Yeah, in the notes, yeah. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to talk to you, like how to find sellers, like where to go to get resources to learn how to do this. Because believe me, the first time I heard it, my head was spinning too. It's like, oh, this is really
I've heard it many times.
Yeah.
Many times. Subject to and reps. Yeah, that's something else.
Yep.
I've heard it many times. I just never dived in, and I'm like, I don't know. It just never happened. Like I would never learn it. I know some other. I had a friend who learned about it. He was gonna do it, but then he didn't do it. Yeah, but for somebody's hearing first time, it's like, whoa.
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. And I have to explain it to sellers sometimes multiple times. Yep.
I mean, I was like, okay, I'm not going to get paid. I'm going to get in trouble with my loan. It's a scam, something like that. The attorneys, it's a process. You have to really get them comfortable.
Totally. And I've heard it every time. Like, this sounds too good to be true, or is this a scam? And, you know, we have multiple conversations. I send them information. I meet them at their house.
Yeah,
I don't
you gotta send them a bunch of links to internet probably so they can read it online.
Yeah. They know me. They got to know me.
Yeah.
And then we meet at the house sometimes more than once. We have a relationship. You know, we're gonna if I have a 15 or 20 year term with a seller, we're gonna know each other for 15 or 20 years. So it has to be a good fit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to want to do business with each other.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
Yeah,
that's another one.
That's right.
What's a rep? What's that rep? What is that rep about? You get a new loan.
Oh, the wrap. Yeah. So essentially, what you're doing is if I have a loan in place with the seller and I buy it subject to, you can do a wraparound mortgage to the buyer, to your buyer. This will get really confusing, but that's what when we talk about a wrap, that's what we're referring to. Yeah, like you can go ahead and because you have the title to this property, like if I buy your house subject to your existing loan, but the deed transfers, I own the house, like the loan's just in place, I can go ahead now and create another mortgage for the buyer if I choose to do so. That's the wrap. It's a wrap around your loan.
It's a new bank.
Yeah,
that pays off the first bank.
No. We just create a note. Like we're creating a mortgage note, another instrument, paper, a loan to that buyer, and that while your loan's
getting... What's the benefit?
Well, the benefit is that you get to finance the buyer, typically at a higher interest rate. So, you know, you might finance a buyer at 6, 7, 8%, which may seem crazy, but again, there's no cost. Like, it doesn't cost the buyer.
The exit a little bit is confusing for me. The exit is when the buyer goes to the bank and finally cashes you out.
My loan, 10 years.
Right.
Yeah. So the note that the mortgage that I created, and the easiest way around that is just simply to do because when I create that wrap, this is very complicated. You could sell the note, right? Right, which is a whole nother show.
Carlos, how do you like this oldest thing so far? You want to do it? You want to do it?
Oh yeah.
Creative financing.
That's super. It looks like it's like passive income almost.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. But first it's active, and then it becomes passive.
It's active because of the work that you have to do, right?
Yeah, you have to find and then get them, and then create this, and then after it's done, then it becomes passive.
Yeah. And you can do anything with these houses. Like I have my strategy when I obtain the houses, but if you chose to rent them, long-term rentals, you could do that. If you want to do short-term rentals, you can do short-term rentals. You get a great property in a great area, you're able to buy it subject to, you can look at a short-term rental strategy. There's so much you can do other than what I just
How much competition do you have in Chicago?
There's not a lot of people who do this because they don't know about it. Right. So my competition would be really wholesalers, and I get that a lot. You know, it's like the first things that sellers will say to me is like, "Are you a realtor?" You know, no offense to anybody. I love great realtors, but it's like, "Are you a realtor?" And "Are you an investor?" And by investor, they mean, "Are you someone who's going to pay me 60 to 65% on the dollar?" Like I'm not interested in that. So we have to break down those walls.
Right.
But again, it's all about discovering their motivation. Like how quickly can you find out why they're selling? Because not everybody. This isn't for everyone. It's not.
Yeah.
Can the seller pull back? Once they sign, it's pretty much done.
No. They great question. So they can. I've had that happen. I mean, and I tell them it's your house. If you decide you don't want to sell it, but once I place a buyer in the home, now I have occupancy. They can't back out of the deal at that point because now we're in there. Now we're in the house. Like we have occupancy. But prior to that, if we're out marketing looking for a buyer and they say, "Hey, I've changed my mind. I'm gonna stay," there's nothing I can do.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they change their mind and out of a 15-year deal that you created, 5 years later they decide, you know what, I kind of want to keep it.
Yeah.
Can they?
Tenants,
no.
Then that property is yours.
That's sold.
Yeah, I own it. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah. That's already sold.
I own it. Yeah, and we have occupancy as well, so you'd never be able to get the tenants out, even if they wanted to.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's too far.
Yeah. It's before we take occupancy of the property, which where they'd be able to back out, and that happens.
All right, that's pretty cool. Okay, thanks so much, Brian. Thanks everybody for watching, listening. If you have any questions, reach out to Brian, and yeah, see you in the next one.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thanks, man. Great being on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.